Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Backyard Professor Live. Welcome to the show. I have Dr. Trevan Hatch, BYU scholar and professor here tonight. We are going to show you all about Jesus, but not just any Jesus, the actual Jesus from his own culture, which we have a living expert right here to guide us unfailingly through it all. Let's get this show on the road. We're going to do the New Testament stuff tonight. Yes, sirree, Bob. All right. Yes, we are live. Absolutely. I have my good friend, Dr. Trevan Hatch from Brigham Young University. Trevan, how are you doing tonight?
Doing good, thanks. Thanks, Kerry. Or do you want me to call you Backyard Professor?
No, call me Kerry. All my friends call me Backyard Professor. We're not formal around here. We are when it comes to doing the knowledge and the analysis and stuff. But yeah, we're good friends here. So you call me Kerry, I'll call you Dr. Trevan. No, I'll just call you Trevan.
Sounds good.
So looks like we've got a pretty good group of people tonight, which is awesome. Welcome, everybody. Welcome all you folks who are new to the channel and the subscribers. We do this every Sunday night, try to have good quality guests. So I see quite a few of you that I know: Peter Higg, Newton Lemnos, Gail Capson, Patrick Kelly, Doug, Vincent, Mosia. I love all you guys. You're awesome. Peter Higgs, I mentioned. Elisa Gallian. I keep messing up your name, hon. I am so sorry. Tim Rathbone. I saw Radio Free Mormon. Yes. No, that theme music is mine, Radio Free Mormon. You cannot have it. And then I saw Dan Vogel. I know. I talked to Dan Vogel earlier tonight. He said he's going to be here. There he is. Yeah. John Rossbarski. Mustang. Hey, welcome. I haven't seen you here before, at least not your name. Welcome, Mike Weiss. Good to see you. Worked for Lutterworth. Good to see you. You might be new also. If so, welcome. We're glad to have you. We like new people, old people, middle people, young people, in between people. It doesn't matter, just so you're all people. Tonight, I am excited. I'm sorry I'm being so frivolous, but I am so excited to have Dr. Hatch here. Because I'm trying to do this New Testament commentary. I did the Sunday school you always wanted to have but never did. That's kind of how I bill it out, meaning that I like to, just like my opening says, I like to look at all angles of the New Testament, not just the doctrine, even though that is fun as well. It really is. But first off, let's say, Dr. Hatch, we're going to have you kind of introduce yourself a little bit. But before you do, I do want to at least brag on you just a little bit. You guys, Dr. Hatch has his own YouTube channel. And this is a great, not that one. This is a great place to look. He's got several videos. Look at some of his videos: The Angry God and the Canaanite Genocide, Jesus Among the Rabbis, Interview with Gospel Tangents. He's been on Gospel Tangents, the entire book of Genesis in 1 hour, Amos, Obadiah, and Jesus, Strangers in Jerusalem. He's got a lot of videos up here that,
There's my intro. Yes.
Holy cow, that's it, isn't it? That's one of them. Look at that start. Look how beautiful he does this stuff, you guys. Dude, you're like a pro. I'm such a punk compared to you. Look at that. That's beautiful. There's Israel.
Dr. Trevan G.
Okay, anyway, so the idea is, if you want to learn more about the New Testament and about Jesus from an expert, I have this gentleman here I'm introducing you to, Dr. Hatch. Why don't you tell us what, you young people really make us old farts mad sometimes. Because you've told me you're also working on a second PhD. That is so awesome. 2 of them, Kobe Townsend's doing the same thing. So what is your educational background? Tell us who you are.
Okay, yeah, thanks. It's a story in and of itself, and there's a lot going on there. Nobody likes an overachiever. So whenever I'm introduced and I'm like, I got 2 master's degrees and working on my 2nd doctorate and doing all this stuff, it sounds like it. Really, sometimes it's embarrassing for certain reasons, because in our culture, especially, I'm in the church. I'm at BYU, and when I move to new wards and I introduce myself, I'm kind of shy not to say too much, because if I start rattling off my training, or if they ask me, "Oh, what do you do there? Are you a professor? What do you teach?" and there's always somebody in the room who won't like me simply because I'm an academic. That's just the world we live in. So anyway, so the whole story behind all that. So I started at BYU in Ancient Near Eastern Studies, and I moved over. I got spooked early because I could see the writing on the wall fairly early, and that is Latter-day Saints who study the Bible are not getting jobs outside of BYU. I mean, there's 1 or 2, literally like 2 people, 2 or 3. I know 3 off the top of my head. So I moved over to history, pulled all my Ancient Near Eastern Studies credits, Hebrew, all that stuff, all those classes over to history, and finished there. So then I thought, I don't want to go do biblical studies. Again, that's what I love, but I'm not going to get a job. So let me do something broader. And I chose Jewish studies. That's not broader. That's not more practical, but I thought it was. Right? It's really hard to navigate this as a student because you have these goals that you want to be an academic, but we don't know how problematic this profession is, the politics, the cultiness of it, until we're down the road. So anyway, I did a master's degree at Baltimore Hebrew University in Jewish studies, and I applied to Brandeis and I applied to a lot of these Jewish studies schools, and I got into them, and I ended up at Baltimore Hebrew. This is a fantastic experience. I lived in around North Baltimore. 100,000 Jews live up there. I had 15 synagogues within 2 miles, so that was great. So then I could not. This is right after the recession, so I was getting rejected to all the PhD programs I applied to, and if I got into one, they had no funding. So I came back to UVU from 2010 to 2012 and taught philosophy and ethics and religion at UVU, while picking up Greek, because I didn't have Greek yet. I just had Hebrew and Aramaic, German and stuff like that. So 2 years I was teaching over there, teaching those kids. That was fun, different experience over there than what I got at BYU. But then I got rejected again, and I didn't know what else to do. I had my GRE scores was high. It was really high, 93rd percentile in the verbal. I had my GPA. I had all these languages, and I wasn't getting in. So I was about to give up and say, forget this, I'll do something else. But I decided to give it one more go around to apply. But instead of just staying in Jewish studies or early Jewish studies or Bible, like the world of the Bible, Jewish study stuff, I looked around the country for anybody who studied Judaism or Israel, even if it's modern Israel. And I was looking at political science. I was looking at comparative literature. I was looking everywhere for anybody that would allow me to just study and stay in religious studies. So I find this guy at LSU in the Bayou, and he was a family studies scholar, but he was in a school of social work, He was not a social worker, but he studied Jewish, Christian, and Muslim family life. So I thought, okay, maybe I called him up and I said, that's not really what I had in mind, move to family studies. I was more of a historian, and, can I make the transition right into a PhD program in social sciences? He's like, yeah, we'll train you on everything. We'll train you on the method. We interview people, we interview families. And he said, I've got 1,000 pages of data on American Jews, and we haven't coded it. We haven't done anything with it. It's all yours. So I knocked out that dissertation pretty quick, but it's still not. So I'm a trained PhD social scientist, and I apply a lot of the questions that social scientists ask about, like the power structures and the relationship between the lower class and the upper class, like all that kind of stuff, identity and all that kind of stuff. So I apply that to the ancient world. But when I was at LSU, my first love was the world of the Bible and Hebrew and Jewish history. So I applied to another doctoral program in Chicago at the Spertus Institute of Jewish Studies in Chicago. We got a big, beautiful building right there on Michigan Avenue, overlooking Lake Michigan. So I started that program as well. And concurrently, I just was running 2 doctoral programs at the same time. Really I had some funding, and it was just, in my head, it's just the same doctoral training. I'm being trained as a PhD, but it looks more impressive than it is. It's just 2 different things. Anyway, so it's a lot of work. I'm still finishing it. 10 years. Yeah. I started in Bolton in 2012. I finished one in 2015, and I'm still writing the dissertation on the other one.
Nice.
So that's the whole thing. Oh, then when I came to BYU, I'm actually a faculty member in the library. So my main appointment is I'm the religious studies, Middle East, biblical studies, ancient Near East. Those are the subjects, but I'm the research specialist, the librarian in the library. So
that could actually be seriously helpful, though. That's cool, because I've spent many years. I've been down there several times, photocopying boatloads of stuff, and that's quite a library to be in. So that's good. Hey, it was in the BYU library where I was standing there in the aisle that had all of the Jewish material on that side, and I mean, it went down for 150 yards, eight shelves high, and on this side was some other culture thing. And it was there that it dawned on me. I had to search for a book that Nibley had referenced, and I finally found the book and photocopied the part I needed. It was at that moment it dawned on me, I am never going to be able to read just that side of one shelf of hundreds of shelves and a dozen stories. And I started to weep. I realized my ignorance is really complete. I'm fully ignorant of all of this fantastic knowledge, and I'm there. It was an exhilarating, depressing moment all at the same time. And I sat down there. There was a little desk chair thing over by the wall, and I sat down and cried for about half an hour. The one gal came up and said, "Are you okay?" Yeah, I'm fine. I'm fine. So anyway, boy, what a weird perspective I've got.
Yeah, and it's a fun career, but it's not what I had in mind when I applied. I found out about it, and I thought, oh, librarianship, like at the time, the stereotypes, there's like, that's kind of hokey, I mean, librarianship, doesn't seem very serious. But once I started looking into it, and I found out that I have faculty status, but everything I'm doing all day long deals with the subject area. Like I do have committee work that I go and sit on committees, but
sure.
I have students come into my office. I have a whole bunch from anthropology, Middle East, and religion. And they need help with their papers, and they're really good subjects. I mean, these are history students and Middle East students. So I'm helping them. I'm helping faculty get what they need. And then I do my own research. So it's the best kept secret in academics, and I don't have to teach, I don't have to be locked into teaching the 4-4-2, 4 class in the fall, 4 in the winter, 2 in the summer. So it's a fantastic job. So I had to get another master's degree in library science. They paid for it. So this is the whole story about why so much education. What's interesting is sometimes I'll interact with people online, and they'll see, and then maybe this will segue us into, the next thing that we're going to talk about. But I had people tell me, uber conservative, like ultra, like Orthodox Latter-day Saints online, tell me that I've been poisoned by academia. The fact that I'm a social scientist and a Jewish studies scholar, and like I've been trained in these different areas, ultra liberal fields, that I can't possibly come out of that without being like a full blown Marxist. And I've been tainted by that stuff. And so really we're living it. We still have those remnants of a anti-expert or anti-academia. Anyway, so we'll talk about some of this today.
Right now, I can state, based on my experience, you are truly in a seriously magnificent library. Probably not the best in the nation, but for private universities, BYU is second to none, and it's in their Jewish, Hebrew, biblical materials because of the theme of the restoration of the gospel that BYU has put to, and I know the Arabic collection because of Nibley and all that, the ancient studies and all that, but the shelves just go on. It is a scholar's mouth-watering dream come true to research in BYU library. I enjoyed every time I went, and it's a gorgeous building, man, outside and in, as far as that goes. So
I said, my partner, he's 2 doors down. So I do all religion that's not Latter-day Saint, Bible religion, world religions, and then Middle East anthropology. He does church history and doctrine. And so together we purchase everything that we can get. And we've had people get mad at us for pulling in any kind of like anti-Mormon, whatever they want to label it. We pull that stuff in. Like we want to purchase everything that we can get. And we have a robust budget. It's great. It's a great place to be.
Well, I'm going to start writing some books then, and I want you to purchase 200,000 copies of them, if you would, please.
Sounds good. You do it.
Your books are more valuable in that library than any I'll ever write. By the way, let me tell the audience too, we are going to be talking about Trevan's book, that Stranger. It is named Stranger in Jerusalem, and I just finished it this week, and it is absolutely marvelous. Just really incredible. We will talk a little bit about that as an overview tonight, and we will be doing more sessions together and doing a deep dive on, say, Judas Iscariot, the nature of the Gospels, the time era that we're involved with and dealing with. This is sensational information. The thing I've loved about Dr. Hatch's work so far in his book is I've read all this stuff. I get it because I've studied enough of the biblical scholarship that I'm somewhat familiar with it. I'll put it that way. And yet Trevan comes along in his book, and it might be the way he writes, but it actually clarified several issues that I have had in my mind that I've read this stuff before from academic scholars that I never got that kind of a clarity. And so I would strongly encourage everybody, Stranger in Jerusalem. Is that Stranger in Jerusalem, right? That's the name of your book.
Oh, A Stranger, referring to Jesus.
I'm sorry. Yeah. A Stranger in Jerusalem.
Yep.
Fantastic book. You are a credit to BYU for being such a wonderful, clarifying writer. I'm here to tell you right now, you are a gold forehead on their star. So
thank you. Appreciate it.
And the other thing I want to do real quick before I let you start gabbing, there is a book that I bought specifically for my New Testament commentary series, New Testament History, Culture, and Society, put together by BYU, a background of the text of the New Testament. Lincoln Bloomel is the editor. He's done an absolutely excellent job gathering some of the cream of the crop for scholarship. This is the big red book. It's huge. It's huge, 800 pages. There's dozens of articles in this, you guys. I've only gotten through the first 5 chapters, and lo and behold, David Rolfe Seeley is in it. He's pretty good. Lo and behold, I get over here to chapter 5, Messianism and Jewish Messiahs in the New Testament period, by a gentleman named Trevan G. Hatch. You're looking at the man. He's been able to contribute to what I will term now, and forgive me for saying it this way, but I went into Deseret Book. Number one, I hesitated because I know, I get it. The church-owned bookstore wants to promote testimony, build faith, etc. And so some of their stuff is less than scholarly. I'll put it this way. So I was going to the scholarly section, if you can even, compared to BYU Library. Look, I'm not trying to insult Deseret Book. Any bookstore compared to BYU Library is certainly going to be pap and pablum and fluff. BYU Library is serious about their stuff. So I went to the scholar section, and this is one of the books I bought, and this is the one I'm using. And now I have one of the authors on my show, and we will be doing other shows together. So tonight you're going to get a good treat.
Let me add. Can I add real quick? This I just happen to have it sitting here. This my book here.
Yes.
I didn't write this to Latter-day Saints. I mentioned nothing in here about restoration.
Hold it up to your screen, Trevan. Hold it up to your screen better. Yeah, it's a beautiful cover. I like it. Yeah, this is not written just to Mormon. The academia in this and the audience, the range of the audience is perfect, in my opinion. I love this kind of stuff.
And the people on the back I've got, and these are friends of mine. I know these people. I asked them to endorse it. I've got Peter Haas, professor of Jewish Studies Emeritus at Case Western Reserve. Victor Meyerman, he's is a rabbi in Chicago and Hebrew University of Jerusalem. He's taught at Columbia. And Leonard Greenspoon, who I've actually edited a book with. Leonard Greenspoon is the Jewish Studies chair at Creighton. So, I know these people. And so, this is not, I'm not trying to cram in any kind of restoration insights. I'm not ashamed of that stuff. It's just not what this book is. I wanted to write this to a larger audience.
Right. Now, and I can appreciate that folks do appreciate, and it's all valid, when they do get restoration insights. But this particular approach in the New Testament history, culture, and society really has appeared to me to put together an academia rigorous approach, just like it says, a background to the texts of the New Testament. I think they've done it. There are articles on plants, there's articles on clothing, which you wouldn't think were interesting. They are really interesting. I am so not joking. I was skeptical when I picked up. I said, why on earth would you? Who cares about the plants and what kind of shoes they wear? But it's interesting. It really does make a difference to our appreciating the texts and the time. Look, we're going back 2,000 years. It's very difficult to assess what happened 2,000 years ago, even with written texts, as your book so masterfully shows. So you want to talk about, let's see, what did we need? Oh, your information on Judas Iscariot was really eye-opening to me. I was somewhat familiar from other areas on a different, and then we've got this Gospel of Judas Iscariot, the recently discovered one, and you didn't even bring that in much, just your careful, excellent reading of the texts and the information from a Judaic point of view gave you some insights on Judas Iscariot that I personally really appreciated. Why don't you've got a presentation. Why don't you go ahead? I'll back out a little bit. I mean, I am going to interrupt you. It's my show. No.
So wait. Before that, do you mind if I? Okay, let's jump into it. But before that, I want to mention the potential elephant in the room of why, how backyard professor and myself as a BYU scholar came, like how we decided to do this, what's the point, why am I on with you, Carrie?
Because I begged you and paid you $10,000. Yeah, go ahead.
Because your audience is going to want to wonder, and probably some people here at BYU, maybe even administrators, or what's Trevan doing? So, for me, I've sat in many classes. I can't even remember how many times I've sat in classes where I was the only non-Jew in the room. In Israel, in Baltimore, and in Chicago. And I started noticing something about that community that I wish we had in the Latter-day Saint tradition, whether it's at church or progressive Mormon, post-Mormon, like whatever it is. I wish we had this. And that is, I saw countless times where we had like ultra liberal, even atheist Jews in the same room with people who belong to the conservative or reform or reconstructionist, or like ultra orthodox, like black hat type Jews in the same class, all discussing the tradition. There's respect, and they join each other's podcasts and they talk. It's not always like that. I mean, there's some tribalism there too. But when I came to BYU, I thought, why can't we be more like that? Why do we sometimes over here, like at BYU, sometimes I feel like we navel gaze too much. Or not necessarily even at BYU, but just in some wards, you have people who are, they'll be mad just the fact that I'm on here, because even though, so at certain times, people like Carrie or RFM or Bill Rill, that Mormon Discussions family, not at times, a lot of times critical of the church. And so they're going to say, why are you even on there? And my response is, because they are part of my bigger tribe. They're part of my bigger tribe, and they have the history and tradition with me. And we're not even talking about the church or anything like that.
Group hug.
Group hug. We're not even talking about that. So I thought, if somebody wants to talk to me about my book, my research, these topics that I care about, then I want to do it. And so I'm comfortable. I'd be perfectly comfortable to sit down with the most like uber conservative Latter-day Saint. I know where they're coming from, and I could sit down with Bill Rill, RFM, Carrie. I could sit down with you guys and find ways to discuss and talk. So I just wanted to mention that for people to wonder, like, how did this happen? And anybody who is either in my camp or Carrie in your camp, like whatever that means, dumping assumptions onto why and how these guys are talking, that to me is just noise. And I'm cool with everybody. So yeah, I wanted to come on and just chat and talk about this, especially since you're doing a New Testament series, and talk about a subject I love. So I think people might have been curious. How did this happen?
Yeah. That's a good clarification. Let me also state somewhat of my philosophy too. I have come to appreciate, and when I was an apologist, I was pretty arrogant, and I was combative. And I did not make friends. I ridiculed too much, and I challenged too hard, more out of ignorance than knowledge. And so the spirit of inquiry, as well as the spirit of give and take and share and learning, never really jived with me. And so thanks to Bill Reel and RFM getting me back involved with making videos, I have discovered that it is so much more enjoyable to have a friendship. And in a friendship, it doesn't matter whether you're atheist, Jew, Christian, Mormon. I don't care what your background is. I don't care if you're male, female. I don't care if you're homosexual or otherwise. It's irrelevant to me who or what you are. What I'm enjoying now is having the discussion. And rather than me dictating to someone what they believe or what they're allowed to present so it doesn't make me angry or fearful, let's have your point of view. Let's discuss it in a respectful manner and say, hey, I learned something from you, because I'm not here to deconvert any more than I am to convert. I'm actually learning more now from people such as yourself and all the other guests that I've had on than I ever did just reading, studying books with the intent of proving them wrong because they didn't think like me and come to the conclusions I come to. Giving that approach up has helped me reach out as a common human being, a common brother with the common brothers and sisters, and let's have a discussion because I inevitably have found, and it's the craziest darn thing, Trevan, everyone that I have a discussion with is way smarter than I am at something. And I also have something that I can contribute back. And it's fun because I'm becoming friends with so many fantastic people. And I wouldn't trade this for anything. So I appreciate getting your perspective. And this isn't going to be about a challenge. Ooh, I'm going to refute you. As soon as we're done on this, I'm going to make a video and I'm going to slash your tires of scholarship and I'm going to wipe you out. No, I'm learning from you. We're all here to learn and understand. And the only way to do that is have that cross dialogue. And guess what? It enriches not only you and I, not only our audience, but everyone who watches the video too. It really does end up being enriching rather than a negative. So,
and I can add that if I add one more thing, another reason
sure.
why I wanted to come on is because this is an interesting time for BYU. We have, we're getting hit by both sides, and we have discussions about this in our faculty meetings. The administration's talking about this. I have discussions with colleagues. We really are. We have on the one side, we have the left, whatever the words we're going to use. Like we have people who are
liberal,
outside the church or liberal or secular, whatever it is, that use the term BYU professor or BYU scholar, use that title as a slur almost. Like all they have to say is BYU professor. And
I've done that with some of them. I apologize. I'm guilty of that in some ways.
Right. And so we have that. So I wanted to come on and say, okay. And every time I see this on Facebook, I comment, I'm like, look, not all of us are what you think. And it's not always black and white. Some of us are trying to do good work and we're trying to stay faithful to the church and like what they expect here at BYU and also do good research. So on the one hand, we're getting hit from that side, and where people are thinking like, oh, especially the religion guys, those like they have their head so far in the sand, and like they're that's just not the case. There's some people like that, but I want to come on and show that some of us are trying to do that. And on the other side, we're really getting hit by the ultra conservative, like I don't know the right words, like rural Idaho, Utah prepper. Like I don't want my kid to go there because they are off the rails liberal and they're teaching critical race theory. And, like on the one hand,
they said the word evolution.
Right. Right. On the one hand, we're getting called Bob Jones University. On the other hand, we're too liberal and we're leading our kids down a dark path. And it really is unfortunate because I just don't, it's not really fair. I went to lunch recently with Greg Mattson, who's Quick Media, CWIC on YouTube, and he's got a lot of followers, and I saw he does a lot of videos where he'll find out about maybe a professor talking about abortion or LGBT or critical race theory, and he does a huge video and just blasts them. And so I was getting on the comments saying it's more complicated than that, because what I was seeing in the comments, people are saying we need to do away with the school. All these people are just off the rails liberal. And so I'm just trying to like have a dialogue and say, it's not like that. So I went to lunch with Greg. He came to Utah and just last month, about 3 weeks ago, so I could see where he's coming from. And it turns out that he's not as raging right winger as I thought he was. Like talking to him directly, he's like, look, I'm not my commenters. I'm trying to shed light on problematic people at BYU from his perspective. he said, but I'm not, I know that he's like, I went to BYU. I know there's good people there. And so, now I'm here and talking with you. So that's one of the other reasons why I wanted to come on, is to say, let's not take our, be so ideological and take our sides.
Let's not present too many stereotypes yet. There's a range of scholars at BYU. They aren't just one or the other.
Right. Yep.
Would that be fair to say?
That's fair. Yeah. I see all of them. I see them. Yeah. So
just so you know, for future reference, and you can send your boss here to watch this, the Backyard Professor officially finds you to be a great credit to BYU, and I say that in all sincerity. Your article in this book, edited by Lincoln Blumel, is well written. Your book, A Stranger in Jerusalem, is superbly informative, and it's clarifying. That's what we, the public, ask of you, the scholars. And Dr. Hatch, you have delivered so far, so don't change it. Keep publishing and writing, and keep coming on to YouTube videos, because quite frankly, this is one of the directions that lots of academia scholarship is beginning to take, and it works because you can talk to your own colleagues in the ivory tower, to use the well worn out image. I get that, yes. But there's a whole lot more John Q. public that can't get access to your research and resources. Come on to our channels and we'll share it with millions. And they will end up giving you credit where credit's due. When you show you've got what it takes, I think you're on the way. So this is a great venue. My wife told me, dude, start pronouncing your words right. But yeah, so this is what makes it fun for me, is having good, viable scholars with their actual scholarship. Not that you're trying to convince everyone, nor are you ever going to agree with everyone. Welcome to academia. That's how the real world works. And I'm not trying to say that as a pick against the church, but it wants unity of thought in doctrine and belief. And by now, honestly, I don't know if that's even possible. We're not going to worry about that. What we want is our understanding to increase, and that's a good thing.
Excellent. Yeah, appreciate that.
So, what have you got for us in your New Testament materials?
Share my screen.
And I'll let you know when your screen comes up or how it comes up. All right, here we go. Thank you, Mosia. There's your comment, but I'm going to take it off because I want to share Dr. Hatch's screen here. Okay, let's get to the screen here. Okay, so that's good right there. That'll work. Our criminal investigation, is that where you're at?
Yep. Okay. I'll explain this. And Carrie, I can't see you, so if you want to interrupt, I can stop sharing, we can talk, and then I can jump back on, like whatever you want. It's fine.
You just start talking. If you can hear me, that's all the interruption you need. So
sounds good. Okay, so this first screen. This is just kind of something I do with my students. I say, we're gonna pretend here that we are in the 3rd century, and the Christian church, the Christian community is reopening the case of Judas's case, and to reevaluate the evidence. So then we're going to walk through it. And I got a timer on this, so it's going to move. I don't know how to turn off the timer.
You better talk fast.
Right. So the reason why I talk about this subject is because it's a good case study for what the texts are, for looking at the text, looking at the Synoptic Gospels versus John, and all those different texts and what they're doing, what the motives are, and the implications. So I do this with my class. I talk about this, and it's one of my favorite discussions because it allows us to learn about, to consider the topic of messianism, like messianic expectations, the text, the nature of Scripture, all that kind of stuff, the historical Jesus, It's fascinating. So let's just dive in. I don't know how long this will take. It shouldn't take too long, maybe half hour or so. But let's just walk through this, the evidence, and then at the end, I'll show you my conclusion and why, what I think Judas is up to. So first we have the betrayal. And I put this word up here because we keep using the word betray, but the word does not mean betray. You can see up here, it's for those getting this audio or visual, it's paradokin, which means to hand over or deliver, but it does not mean to betray. So we already start from the word that's being used in the text. Now, here is William Clausen, scholar. I think he's was at Cambridge. Here's what he says, and he gives an example of some of my own findings. He says, not one ancient classical Greek text has surfaced in which this verb, paradokin, in its various forms, means betray or has the connotation of treachery. Josephus, the most prolific historian of the first century, uses this word 293 times, but not once can one legitimately translate it employing the word betray. There is no linguistic basis in classical Greek, in the Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible, in Josephus or patristic sources for a translation of betray to describe what Judas did. So there's different words that would mean something where somebody did that was a treacherous betrayal, against a close person or family member. Okay, so that's number one. He's right out of the gates, starting with that word. Okay, so then we go to the Last Supper, and we have some differences in the text. We've got Mark mentions that there was one person in the room who would hand over Jesus to the authorities. And in Mark, it scandalizes the apostles. They're like, who's going to be it? They're wondering which one. Okay, then we get to Matthew, and in the author of Matthew, it's Judas who wonders whether it would be him. He's the one to do this. Okay, so the problem is we have all of our assumptions from what we've learned for decades, and in the movies, we're already, like when we read it, we just dump all these assumptions saying, okay, Judas he's like a sleazeball and Jesus wants him to do it. But if we remove all that, here's the data we have. Everyone's wondering if they're going to be the one to do it. Okay, so then we're still in the Last Supper, and we've got in John, different account, in a different time for different purposes. Jesus encourages Judas to do quickly what you're going to do. So it still doesn't mean what we think it means yet in terms of just the data, that Judas is crazy. In fact, this painting here, you can see, in addition, I think there's a back. You can see some of these. Okay, this is interesting. I'm glad I went back. See how Judas, that red-haired guy on my right-hand side of the screen?
Right.
I don't know who the author is, but it's probably an author who doesn't like, someone who looks like that, a redhead, or, I don't know, somebody from Scotland or something. I don't know. You know what I mean? So it's whatever that is, whoever wrote this, who portrayed Judas looking like that, different than the apostles, to him, that was a dig. Okay. Also, look at this. Look how hairy, and look at his eyes.
Yeah.
Clearly, that's the assumption. This guy's worst you can get. Okay. So when Judas exits the room in John, the other disciples they don't assume that there's some problem. They just assume that he's leaving to get food or to give to the poor. So thus far, so far in the data, we have no evidence that there was hostility between Jesus and Judas, or between Judas and the other apostles. Okay, they've been with each other for I don't know how many years. People typically say that Jesus' ministry lasted 3 years, but that's in the synoptics, and that's in John, and it's not even 3 years. He went to Jerusalem at the beginning, in the middle, and end of his ministry. Okay, well, that's 2 years. In the synoptics, it's like 1 year. Okay, so we're dealing with 1 or 2 years of these people being together all the time, and they're not picking up if he is as bad and evil as we want to say, as his tradition has put on him. Like there's no evidence of that, at least so far. Okay. Now we get to Judas's motives, and this is where it starts to say, okay, as a historian, as a Jesus studies scholar, like if somebody's coming to the data and they want to look at Jesus's deeds or sayings and saying, what did he really do and say, and how do we reconstruct the history, and how to reconstruct historical Jesus? This is a very good example. Okay, so the Gospels are conflicted. Here's two two conclusions by interpreters. So Jesus commanded Judas to hand him over as part of a divinely ordained plan. This is later Christian interpreters, okay? Or Judas was greedy and evil, and therefore he betrayed Jesus. So both of those are problematic to me, okay? And we'll talk about those. But Matthew has him, they're getting this from Matthew. He's greedy, and his greed compelled Judas to betray Jesus. Luke and John, however, say that he was possessed by a satanic influence. These authors are writing 30, 40, 50 years after Jesus died. And so they probably don't know what happened to Judas. As we go through, you'll see this. And so they're trying to explain whatever happened to that Judas guy and why did he do it? And this, this is their explanation. It's like, oh, he's greedy or he's possessed by satanic influence. Okay, Mark, the earliest gospel, there's no motivation for why Judas handed Jesus over to authorities. In fact, in Mark, Judas comes out pretty well. Judas comes out better in Mark than I think the original apostles, the other apostles. I mean, Mark takes it to him pretty good. And then Matthew takes it to Peter pretty good. He doesn't like Peter. That's a different discussion we'll have a different time, but Judas actually fares pretty well in Mark. Okay, so you can see the differences. Okay, so let's kind of go through this. I've got my words up on the screen, but this is just from my students. Basically, the issue is if Judas was demonic and evil and greedy and was easily compromised, then why would he so quickly slip into a depression or like this, as I say here, repentant state and want to return the money? And then kill himself, according to Matthew, kill himself after Jesus' conviction. Like, why the immediate remorse? Now, if there's any like psychologists or any kind of therapists that I can look through this and pick up some problems with the standard interpretation. Okay, why would Jesus command on the other explanation is why would Jesus command Judas to hand him over in order to accomplish something that he was divinely ordained to do? Right, something like Abraham. Command Abraham to do this according to tradition, and because whatever Abraham ended up doing, it exalted him. It moved him from one state to a more exalted state, right? From Avram to Abraham. That's not what happened to Judas. This resulted in Judas' disgraced death and his death and his disgraced legacy. Okay, so why would Jesus do this?
That's actually a really interesting point I had never thought of before. Very cool. Yeah.
And when I was going through the text, I'm trying to piece this together and saying what's really going on here. Again, you'll get my conclusion at the end, but these are the things that I'm thinking about. That does make sense. Okay. In John, and my students don't like this. In John, Jesus knew from the beginning that Judas would betray him. And so you got the text right here. It says, Jesus answered them, "Did I not choose you, the 12? Yet one of you is a devil." He was speaking of Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot, for he, though one of the 12, was going to betray him. The reason why my students, at least last time I taught this class, I'm teaching this semester, I haven't got to this yet. The reason why they don't like it is because it looks like Jesus is being, like he's just stringing Judas along. He's just stringing him along in sort of like an entrapment sort of situation where he's putting him in positions where he knows that Judas will fail. Okay, the implications of that, for all kinds of different Christians, that doesn't work. It doesn't work for my students. It doesn't work for me. Many of you probably doesn't work for. Like to assume that Jesus is going to do that, so that why can't he just hand himself over? Why does he have to destroy someone's life, destroy someone's legacy because he knew that he would betray him? Okay, that doesn't make sense either to me. Okay, more things to consider. In Matthew, Judas delivered Jesus for 30 pieces of silver. This is about 120 days' wages. And I just did a little bit of math. If these guys are fishermen, lower middle class, they have essentially what they need. They're not impoverished. So let's say 40,000 annually, according to our standards, and then betraying him for 120 days' wages, about $13,000. Okay, so yeah, he would have to be psychotic, or he'd have to be absolutely greedy. You'd have to have some condition to where he's going to take his teacher, his master, sell him off for the low price of a slave, for 13,000.
Yeah, I like how you put that in today's equivalency, because that really does present serious problems for a greedy Judas. Now, that is from Matthew, though, but yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. And there's a few other things that we have to keep in mind, but as we go through this, but here that even that bottle, that bottle of ointment that woman uses on the Mount of Olives, where she pours it on his feet, that's more than double the price of the slave. So you can really see that Judas is not turning this guy over, Jesus over, for very much. I mean, why doesn't he negotiate a higher? Anyway, this is another reason why I'm not sold on it. So on these common explanations, either from interpreters or from the Gospels. Okay. Here, when Jesus was convicted and killed, Judas realized he made a mistake, and I say here an honest mistake, and he had misunderstood what Jesus the Messiah was supposed to accomplish. So his example is like in Matthew, when he hands over Jesus to Pilate. Judas has repented, immediately returns the money, and then he says this. He says, I have sinned by handing over innocent blood. The word there doesn't mean sin as in like I've sinned against God. The word is hamartano, and it means, I think I've got it here. Yeah, it means to miss the mark or to be mistaken.
Oh, I love how you've analyzed the meaning of the word, because the word sinned, of course, you immediately think, oh crap, now I got to go talk to my bishop.
Right.
A sin, but that's not what this is implying. Oh, I love how you do this. This is one of the things I love about your book. You do this throughout your book, and gosh darn it, I love this kind of stuff. So thank you for being the way you are. Yeah, this is wonderful.
Yeah, no problem. And it makes us think that, because somebody could go to the text and be like, well, Judas says right here, or at least the text, that he sinned. So why are you trying to complicate this? You're like, why are you trying to be an academic and complicated? Well, it's complicated because at least in the tradition that the author of Matthew's getting, he's just mistaken.
Yeah, well, it's complicated because we keep trying to read our modern ideas into it as well, and so we're not getting the full ramification. I don't see you as making this complicated. I see you as taking a step-by-step approach of each one of the different options. Was he greedy? Well, let's look at the state of the material and the evidence, including in the original language, and see if greed makes sense. You make $44,000 annual, and then you turn around and betray a guy for just 13. That is seriously problematic. You then turn around and speedily repent, thinking you have innocent blood. I love how you've broken this down, Trevan. Keep going. This is awesome.
Okay, let's move forward a little bit. Okay, so now we've got what Judas did. We've got his motives. They don't agree. So if we're a historian, so again, we're thinking we're 3rd century Christian church, and we're trying to piece this together and come to a conclusion, maybe at some sort of creed, some sort of creedal conclusion on Judas. We've already got problems. Like, are we going to side with one author of one gospel or the other author to decide on Judas? So the other thing is, what about his fate? Not just what he did, his motives, but what about his fate? Now here's 1 Corinthians. I actually forgot about this for the slide. If you remember, Paul refers to the night that Jesus was handed over. This is in 1 Corinthians 11. And he said, and he used the word paradokin, same word, handed over. But he says that the resurrected Jesus met with the 12 later in this. Wouldn't he say the 11?
Interesting detail. Yeah.
And some people say, yeah, but that's just sort of like, we use that today, the 12. Let's say that a couple of apostles died or whatever, and there's only 10, and you got several months till you call new ones, and it would still refer to them as 12. Okay, that's just kind of I guess it's possible, but I'm not sure you can, at this time, Paul's thinking this as the way we think about a quorum and a group, and the sort of a title of the 12 referring to this quorum. Yeah, it's possible that he doesn't mention Judas, and he's just assuming, like he calls him the 12. Judas is there, right? So it's possible that nothing happened to him. Okay, Mark.
Hang on real quick. I just want to say something to Radio Free Mormon. We are going to have a question and answer session here in just a few minutes. We're going to let Dr. Hatch finish his presentation. So keep your question in mind, Radio Free Mormon. That's a great question. And everybody who has a question, once we get to the question answer, type it all in capitals. It's easier for me to see and read. But yeah, keep that in mind. We will get to that Radio Free Mormon. So, okay, keep going, Dr. Hatch.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, so Mark doesn't mention Judas again after Jesus' arrest. So he's not talking about what happened to Judas. We got Luke and John saying nothing of what happened to Judas after Jesus' crucifixion. So now you got 3 gospels writing the story. They don't say anything. And so really we only have the M tradition, meaning the material that only ended up in the Gospel of Matthew. Does Judas commit suicide? So we got a problem. It's just in one gospel. We also have in Acts.
Yeah. That's important. Yeah, that's important. That's Matthew's position, but that doesn't mean it's historical. That doesn't mean that's how it happened. That's how I should word that. Yeah, interesting. Okay, very good.
Acts, but also in Acts we have Judas dying after taking a fall. I mean, he stumbled and his balance.
Yeah, that contradiction is always brought out by atheists.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a contradiction. The Bible can't be true. Judas died 2 different ways. That's interesting.
And so what apologists will do, or like conservative Christians, they'll just combine them and say, oh yeah, we've all heard it. We've all, like, he hung himself and the rope broke, he fell and his bowels gushed out. But when you do that kind of thing, you risk making a new gospel. There's not one gospel that said that. So if you're going to combine them, gospels that were written at different times, different places with different audiences in mind, you're creating your own gospel. You have to, I tell my students, you have to be aware that you're doing that.
Yeah, James Tabor actually talks about the problem of trying to harmonize the stories. You need each one as their own piece. Otherwise, you lose bits and pieces. So this is important.
And I'll come back to this. There's an explanation for Acts and the difference there. So what else we got? Oh, we have Papias, however you want to say in English, early 2nd century theologian. He said that a chariot hit and killed Judas. So that's different. And then you have the Gospel of Judas, a 2nd or 3rd century. The apostles persecuted and, if I remember, and stoned Judas. So basically what we have is within the first 100 or so years, 100 to 200 years, we don't have a unified position in the Christian community of what happened to Judas. Okay, so the problem now with his death. Okay, so the credibility of the witnesses. I'm not a lawyer, RFM or somebody else. Like, I'm just gonna be having fun with this. But here's
sure, absolutely.
Here's the witnesses.
This is great.
In both the Last Supper and Gethsemane episodes, Matthew paints Judas as the worst kind of betrayer. And how does he do this? What he does is that Judas calls Jesus rabbi during the Last Supper and then again in Gethsemane. Okay, so why is this a problem? Because if you remember in the Gospel of Matthew, later in chapter 23, Jesus tells the people that he says to have the people call him rabbi, but you are not to be called rabbi, for you have one teacher and you are all students. So in that gospel, Jesus doesn't like that title. You shouldn't call him that. And it's precisely Judas in the same gospel who calls Jesus rabbi twice. Okay, so he's trying to make Judas look like, in every angle, look like the worst possible betrayer. Okay. Let's see. I already explained all that. Okay. Now this is interesting. Matthew also links Judas with Judah. These are the same name. Judah and Judas, the same name. Hebrew, Greek, they're both Judah. This is the Joseph of Egypt story. Okay. So you have all of Joseph's brothers reject him except for Judah, suggests selling him for 20 pieces of silver in order to make a profit. And there's actually some manuscripts have 30 pieces of silver. And we see 30 pieces of silver show up in other texts as well. Okay. So Genesis 37, for a profit. So you also have Jesus' disciples deserted him, but only Judas, again, only Judah was willing to sell him for profit, states those very words. So basically only 2 people in all of Jewish and Christian scripture are willing to sell their own brother or teacher into slavery to foreigners, are both for a profit, are both named Judah. Okay, so in other words, and I do this all throughout my book in different ways, I'm suggesting here the implications that Matthew has the Hebrew Bible open, so to speak. Maybe not so to speak, he has the text there. He has it open as he's trying to write and tell the Jesus story. He needs all of these passages, a lot of these passages to refer back to. He needs his audience to constantly to see King David or Moses or Joseph of Egypt or the prophet Elisha. He needs to see that in Jesus' stories. It's everywhere.
Very interesting.
Okay. So, okay, I already talked about that. Okay, here. Now, this is very telling to me. This is why I'm become skeptical that this is a 100% historical. And we've already discussed the problems between the texts, but let's just look in Matthew. Okay, you have David's advisor, Ahithophel. And again, Matthew's trying to, all through from the genealogy all the way through, Matthew's trying to show that that Jesus is like David and Jesus is the son of David. So Ahithophel joins in a conspiracy against David, if you remember. Absalom was trying to overthrow David and take the throne. David flees, he overcomes it, and the conspiracy fails. When it fails, Ahithophel, he says he hangs himself and he dies, just like Judas. The Greek words are the same. The only two suicide hangings all in Hebrew Bible, New Testament. And, okay, here it is, the Greek. It's the exact same words if we take the Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Hebrew Scriptures, the Hebrew Bible, and this passage.
Oh, wow. Yeah. There's the influence right there, isn't it? Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, aperkomai. So
well done.
Himself. Okay. Then this is very interesting. The author of John. This is not Matthew. This is John, though. So he's doing some of this. He quotes Psalm 41, putting words into David's mouth regarding Ahithophel. So this is that Psalm 41 does this. Even my bosom friend in whom I trusted, who ate of my bread, has lifted his heel against me. Notice in John 13, Jesus says the same thing. The one who ate my bread has lifted his heel against me. These authors are drawing the Hebrew Bible all the time. That's what they're trying to do. Okay?
Interesting. Yeah. So there's some creative parallels being created here, isn't there? Or at least some directives to guide what they're thinking back to the Old Testament Hebrew themes. Yeah.
Yep. Okay, let's continue. So now in the book of Acts is the only other text that mentions the death. You have Judas falls and his bowels gush out. This is also David. Another one of his generals was Amasa, or Massa, however you want to say it. He also joins this conspiracy, and it doesn't work. So, sorry, I'll go back. It doesn't work. Conspiracy fails, and so Yoav, yet another general, approaches Amasa, and he takes him by his face, by his beard. He kisses him, just like Judah kisses Jesus. He says, "My brother," just like Judah says, "My master." And then Yoav takes a dagger and stabs Amasa, and it says his bowels, as you can see here, his bowels gushed out on the ground. Okay. So right here, as you can see, these two episodes, the Amasa Yoav episode and the Judas material in Gospels and Acts, have all of these same elements. There's a conspiracy, betrayal. It also says that Yoav wore a soldier's garment when he approached Amasa. There's a friendly verbal greeting, a kiss, a sword, and death as bowels gushed out. It's not a perfect story because throughout the Gospels, it's kind of scattered. Right. But you can see how they're drawing on this. Okay.
Yeah. That's good. Well done. Yeah. So this explains why there's a contradiction in it too. Each one of them is using a different source.
Right. And so for my class, I just to kind of continue this sort of hypothetical, the verdict, is Judas bribery, is conspiracy. I don't even know if I'm using these words right. In the Gospels, are they lying under oath? Are they just defamation of character? Written defamation. Defamation is called libel. So I use this to talk about talk to the class. So okay, what's going on here with these texts? And if we're trying to reopen this case, what are we thinking? So that's what this slide's about. Now, my argument is, what's Judas doing if we're going to look at this historically? And that is, there's some of this material that'll help us, I think. It's going fast. Okay, so Peter, if you remember, when Jesus asked, "Who am I? What are people saying about me?" He says, "Oh, you're the Messiah." And then in that same, at Caesarea Philippi, when Jesus says, "I'm going to Jerusalem and I have to die." Sorry, this is annoying. I have to just
right.
Peter says, "God forbid it, Lord. This must never happen to you." So in other words, Peter's been with him the whole time, and he's still like a Messiah is not supposed to die. A Messiah is supposed to be a Davidic king who's going to free Israel. Okay. You have these two men on the road to Emmaus, back to Emmaus after Jesus dies. He comes to them in disguise. He says, "Why are you sad?" And they said, "Well, where have you been? Don't you know that our prophet died?" And then they said, "We had hoped that he was going to redeem Israel, be that Messiah to come save Israel." And the first question that is asked to Jesus when he is resurrected, it's this in Acts 1:6, "Lord, is this the time when you will restore the kingdom to Israel?" So they're not saying, "Wow, you're here? How did this happen?" Like the very first question, is this now the time that you're going to overthrow Rome and restore Israel? That's their entire worldview.
Fascinating.
Okay?
Yeah.
Then we also get Paul. He admits in 1 Corinthians that the crucifixion of Jesus for Jews was a scandalon in Greek. It's a stumbling block to Jews. Like he knows that. So given all this, and then in my book, I detail the massive chapter, the background in Josephus and other messiahs who are trying to take over royal armories and be a king, and how they're killed and Pilate's chasing them. Like this is the messianic worldview that they have. And it is, by the time Jesus is born and comes into this world, into the Herodian Roman world that they're in, messianic expectations have reached a fever pitch.
Mm-hmm.
So the reason why I put this up here is to then insert Judas. If Judas believed the same thing as all of these people, unless he was like absolutely crazy and he had some like crazy mental health issues that caused him to do this. Aside from that, if he's just like the other apostles, then he believed that Jesus was the Messiah, and therefore he can't lose. So what's fine? Let's turn him in, and to get this thing going, and Jesus is going to light him up. I think I say that in my book. He's going to light him up. This is the gladiatorial game.
Wait, so Judas is not betraying Jesus in his own mind as an evil act. Am I reading you right here? Judas is not betraying Jesus in his own mind as an evil act. He is saying, "Okay, you're the Messiah, and you're gonna kick some butt here. Let's do this. Let's get going."
Yeah, it's the only.
You're saying his motive is not evil. Very interesting.
Right, and obviously we don't know. People say, "Yeah, you can't possibly know that." Well, of course. We don't know that. We can't. This is what scholarship does. You can't go into his mind, but it's the only thing that makes sense. It doesn't make sense to say he's got some demon that made him do this. And even if it did, like, why are we like slandering his name? You know, if he's greedy, nothing makes sense except for like he clearly, if something happened to him, okay, either nothing happened to him and he was just he stayed there and he was there with Jesus' resurrection days and Paul. Either that happened or something did happen to him, and these authors don't know what happened to him, and so they're like, "Okay, whatever happened to that guy," you know, and then they put all their
because they are writing later. That was one of your wonderful clarifying points.
Yeah.
These gospels are being written later. They may not really know. That's why the contradictions are occurring. This doesn't prove Jesus didn't exist, like mythicists would say, or that Judas is an invention. It just means that from a 40-year later time period, we can't know, but the way you look in the clues here is really instructive. In your article here, in this book, you describe so well the different types of messiahs that Josephus was talking about, and every one of them were revolutionary. Now, from what I'm getting from your presentation here is, so the gospel writers also appear to me to be expecting that revolutionary, and then all of a sudden, oh, Jesus is crucified. But that didn't, it was a stumbling block and all, but that didn't do away with the fact that they still were hoping, okay, now are you going to go kick butt?
Right.
Isn't that fascinating? Yeah.
Their explanation. So I use this to say that when we're interpreting scripture, me studying, being trained to read New Testament by Jews and to approach that, you know, we could go out for hours about how this was used by early Christians, medieval Christians, modern Christians to demonize Jews. And Judas, and it doesn't help that Judas's name as Judah, it means Jew. It's like, that's what of all the apostles, it just so happened that the one guy named Jew.
Yeah.
And so we need to take I try to tell my students, let's take a compassionate and careful view. And because if you want to say, let's deal with this historically, you can't just take all the gospels and throw them together. It doesn't make sense. You have to take either Matthew, you have to explain it, and you have to know the Papias and the author of the Gospel of Judas. They also don't know what's going on. So in terms of the scholarship, we have to be aware of that. And so for me, I'm backing away and saying, okay, we can't say for sure. Like even in the book, in the conclusion of that section, I say, here's what we know in terms of the scholar. Here's what we know about what happened. There's some apostle who was believed to have delivered Jesus. We don't know why, and we don't know what happened to him after. Like that, we can't know that.
That's it. Full stop right there. Yeah.
Based on the evidence. So for me, I'm saying if that happened, if there's one of his apostles that turned him in, or somehow is the liaison of this, of how this worked, I'm saying he believed that Jesus was the Messiah. Otherwise, why is he apostle? If everybody else is believing, okay, here's even non-apostles believe that Jesus is the Messiah. A lot of them, like in John 6, it says that there's a whole group of people that took Jesus by force and wanted him to make him their king. And so everybody's following these other messiahs, and they're thinking, and a lot of people following John the Baptist, which made Herod Antipas worried, and so he got killed. So why would there be this strange guy, Judas, like totally like different than everybody else, not expecting anything, wanted some measly, little bit of money? I'm saying he probably thought he was the Messiah, which means you can't lose.
Interesting. That's fantastic. I love how you've broken that down and looked into some details, and you've asked some really good searching questions of various approaches. Was it greed? Well, was it hate and evil? Because Judas has taken it in the teeth for quite a few centuries now of being the real bad guy. And I did tell you this before we started. One of my very favorite statements, you have now surpassed this statement with your wonderful research, but this statement from Joseph Campbell about Judas just completely changed my whole mind about everything when he said, don't consider Judas the bad guy. He is the midwife of our salvation. That's one of those comments that you sit back and you go, oh my gosh, that is an actual valid way to approach this. I never looked at him as that important. Your approach also says that with the idea that Judas did not have a malicious intent. He could have been thinking, yeah, you're the tough guy. You're the one that's going to call the angels down and absolutely kick these guys' butt. Let's do this. Let's get this going. Here's your bread. Let's go.
Right. Yeah. And if something did happen to him,
that is so fascinating because this gospel was written later. We are imputing a motive that they were ignorant of. So we're the ones misreading the text, potentially, in a very bad way.
Yeah, and one thing, and we could talk about this if we do other episodes, and I do it on my YouTube channel and elsewhere. Sure. And that is, in chapter 6 is where I deal with Judas. The first half of that chapter, for 10, 15 pages, I talk about the Christ killer accusation to prepare the reader for the whole second half of the book.
Oh, that was horrifying.
You have Christians using the Judas material every single Passover and or Easter. Every single year there's persecutions that rise, and they're reading these passages. They're saying, like, even Christians are saying, even so the Jews rejecting him, Pharisees rejecting him, even Jesus' own apostle, who's a Jew, and his name's Judah, did the same thing. So you got to be very careful not to perpetuate sloppy interpretations. And I really hit this hard with Pharisees. That's one of my main areas of research, Pharisees.
I cannot wait to do another session with you here coming up on the Pharisees. That's where you got me. That's where I realized Dr. Hatch is the real McCoy. This is superb material. I can't wait to do that session with you. Now, is that pretty much what you wanted to cover on Judas? Shall we do some questions and answers?
Yeah, we're good.
Shall we do some Q&A? Okay, Radio Free Mormon, retype your question. That was a good question, if you would. Put it in caps. Otherwise, I'm going to have to go back and look at it. Everybody who has questions, write them in caps, and we will ask Dr. Hatch the questions. It was involving the JST, so that's why it caught my eye. I thought, wow, that's a great idea. You want me to go back and look for it, RFM? Radio Free Mormon is still here, isn't it? Yeah, you're still here. You just posted. Come on, ask the question, my good brother. Okay, you guys, let's get the questions going. You have a chance to ask a New Testament scholar some great questions on the New Testament or Judas or whatever. You can't tell me you're not curious about something about the New Testament. Here we go. Doug Vincent says, what does the Gospel of Judas say his motives were? Ooh.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. Interesting.
I don't actually remember. It's been about 3 years, and I'm not even sure if it covers it. But I'll actually jot it down and throw it in the comment section when you post this video.
Okay.
Motives.
You say you're looking for it. You'll find it, or we'll do it.
I'll
Okay. Mosia, does it boil down to anti-Semitism, Doctor?
You mean how Judas is portrayed?
Yeah, I suspect so.
It's complicated because I don't know if we can say anti-Semitism or even anti-Judaism, but it could be, because these Gospels are written. It's really, really messy, and I deal with this in several chapters and scholars are still debating what the audience of these Gospels are. Is there a community, or now the latest is that it's proposed that these are elite scribal groups. And so Matthew these are Jewish writers. These are Jewish writers, and so I don't know if we can say it just boils down to anti-Semitism. There's a lot. By the time these Gospels are being written, this is after the Jewish-Roman War, and this is also at a time when the Jewish community, the Jewish leaders, are trying to redefine Judaism after the temple, and those on the fringes, like the Jesus movement, get left out. And so when they write this text, yes, there is some like anti-Judaism or anti-Judean. Like when they say Jews in John, it might be, the Greek word is Iudaioi, which is Judeans. So we're still wrestling with the text of what exactly each author means when they use that Greek word. Does it mean Jews in general? Does it mean Judeans? So it's really messy, and we don't know if Judas is strictly like an anti-Semitic thing, because these people are still writing to Jews in part. And so I'm hesitant to say it only boils down to that.
Yeah. Here's RFM's question. The Joseph Smith translation has 2 death accounts of Judas.
Keep him in there. So
So is that really an inspired Joseph Smith translation? Why? Yeah.
We'll have to go look. Yeah, I'm assuming that he doesn't combine them. Like he leaves them, the 2 death tradition in Acts.
I think so. Yeah, I'm not sure either. It's been a long time since I've looked at the JST.
So inspired, yeah. These are the questions that my students or some people ask about the JST that really starts to make things complicated, because we don't even know what it is. We don't know what the JST is. Like even Latter-day Saints who believe it's scripture, like what kind of scripture? How high? What's its revelatory status? What's Joseph doing? Don't even know what he's doing. He doesn't say exactly what he's doing. So the fact that he left him in there, and actually, by the way, a lot of people, when I talk about this during Holy Week, I'll post on Judas. Some people will criticize. They'll say the fact that Joseph Smith didn't correct it means that the original narrative is right. And that gets into a whole problem by assuming that just because Joseph didn't correct it or he changes something, assumes that we can take it to the bank, like the problem is solved. We just can't do that. It's too complicated. Just to assume that just because Joseph left it alone or didn't touch it, that solves the problem. It doesn't solve it.
We could do some research on that and present another presentation as far as that goes. That would be very interesting. Great question, Radio Free Mormon. Thanks for asking it. Patrick Kelly, was Judas just the fall guy?
He could have been. Yeah, he could have been. If there's a guy named Judas and they didn't like him, like something happened and he left, whatever the case is, it could be that they just threw him under the bus and like, yeah, but it was our guy who controlled the purse. I remember he's the one that controlled the purse. He's the one that did it. And we're all still here in the 50s, 60s. He's not here, or like, in the 40s, 50s, we're all still here. He's not here. He could have been the fall guy.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay. Forden Gamsey, is the Judas character partially based on Judas of Galilee or another of the failed messiahs? Now, Judas Galilee, that's one of the messiahs that Josephus talks about, isn't it?
Yeah, that's interesting. So I doubt it, but yeah, for those who don't know, the Judas of Galilee, this is the one I'm thinking of. It says 4 BC, where after Herod died, he builds up, he gets a big army, and he's going to take over. He revolts against the Herodian family in Rome. They catch him. The Roman governor Varus, the general Varus, catches him, kills him, and kills 2,000 of his guerrilla soldiers. And they line the street, the road, the highway that goes from Sepphoris in the Lower Galilee to the Sea of Galilee. So it's 20 miles or so, with 2,000 crucified men on that road. So
what a message!
And that's right. Yeah, that's right at the time that Jesus is born, right in that area. He's born in Lower Galilee. He knows about these traditions. People, his parents taught him, like right here as you're walking through, because you had to take that road to go into Capernaum and that area. And he certainly knew of that. So in terms of the gospel writers, if they wanted to use Judas of Galilee, my gut reaction is no. It's a different guy, different circumstance. But it's interesting that this guy knows this. It's interesting. You have a smart audience.
Elder Igloo, apparently you've tried to ask a question. You're asking if it got filtered. I don't see that it's filtered. Could you re-ask it and put it all in caps for us, please? It's much easier for me to catch that it's a question. I don't care if everybody else thinks you're yelling. I know you're not. I need the caps. If you would, please. That's a dumb comment anyway. That dumb idea. Well, why are you yelling at me? I'm not. Anyway, that's my particular beef. Okay. Yeah, and actually, that's a good point. In a way, Patrick Kelly, he sounds like he's trying to fit a square into a round hole right now. And in some respects, that's probably true because we can't know for sure. We really can't. So there is guesswork involved here, even with inspiration. That's just the way. Welcome to the study of the Bible. As far as
I would just respond. I would say, if one of my students said that, I'm like, oh, it's unlikely. You seem like you're cramming something. I'm just taking the different accounts and saying we have to pull back and deconstruct it. We can't just go like full hog, combine everything, make it. He's killing himself, and then the rope breaks, or like he really is controlled by a demon. If we take those two gospels, and then I'm pulling away and saying, as a matter of history, reconstructing it, like it's all a mess. And so what I'm trying to reconstruct and say, okay, what makes sense? What makes sense to me is the messianic, because I know I've researched this a lot and published on messianic expectations in the Dead Sea Scrolls, messianic expectations in Josephus. That's the one that makes sense to me. So it could be me cramming a square peg into a round hole, but I think I'm pretty safe to come up with these.
Yeah. RFM just posted Joseph harmonized the death accounts, so he didn't approach it as a historian.
So in that aspect, he's taken the traditional Christian trope. Yeah, that's in there.
Yeah. So that's interesting. Okay, let's see. What's the next? Yeah, so many messiahs. That's a good point too, Mosia. Mosia says so many messiahs. Yeah. How many did you count? You mentioned, wasn't there like a dozen of them that Josephus was talking about, just from Herod to the destruction of Jerusalem. There were like a dozen of them at that point, weren't there?
Yeah,
In that
about a
time
dozen.
frame?
About a dozen.
It's a very active hotbed here. Oh, Judas' last name was Rothschilds. No, it's Vanderbilt. No, it's Morgan. Okay, hold on. I'm scrolling through. What is in your wallet? Oh, yeah. Judas was asked one too many times. Okay, let's see. I'm trying to find. You're making it too tough on me, you guys. Put them in. Oh, here we go. Here we go. Okay, Amam, was the render unto Caesar line the straw that broke the tapir's back for our anti-hero Judas? Always a smart aleck. Oh, Amam, you're something else. I love you, man. You're a hoot. All right, let's see. Lael is asking, did you see my last question? No, I did not. Hold on, I'm scrolling. Let me check and see. In the meantime, let's see. Oh boy, it's way down there. All the rest of you guys, quit typing for a minute. Let the guys writing questions type their questions. Otherwise, you're going to see me here scrolling like crazy and not finding anything. Okay, I'm going to go back down here to the questions. Hey, you're welcome, Mom. Absolutely. Okay, let's see. I didn't, Lael. Type your question again. I can't find it. Looks like Radio Free Mormon is playing bingo. Well, that's what you said, Radio Free Mormon. Oh, this is an interesting comment from my good friend T.O., whom I have had on the show a few times. I'll just post this as a comment for you, Dr. Hatch. The betrayal is represented by an embrace. The setting is the holy place. The veil is implied, and the penalty is personified thereafter. That's kind of an inch. T.O. has some interesting ways to look at some of this stuff. That's kind of fun. Thanks for typing that, T.O. That's fun. Okay, let's see. It looks like I have new comments. I don't see it, Lael. I apologize. I'm trying to see it. Hopefully it was a good one. All right. Any more questions, you guys? We're going to, what I want to do, you mentioned, Dr. Hatch, you mentioned your information on the Pharisees. And now we do know, someone said, well, you're trying to pit it. Oh, never mind. I'll put this question up. Yeah, my point was going to be there are so many different groups that it's inevitable that we're going to get confused and mixed up on which groups are what are they like, etc. And I thought one of the best parts of your books was on the Pharisees. So I'm just going to give you a plug for when we get back together to talk about the Pharisees. I will be advertising it as such because that was truly enlightening, in my opinion. So
my basic argument is that Jesus was a Pharisee, or at least came out of the Pharisaic tradition. And I analyze all 98 or 97 episodes where Pharisees appear. And that's also important for Christian Jewish dialogue and the history of Jewish persecution. So.
Oh, it really would be, actually, wouldn't it? Yeah. Gene Judson, thank you for the question, my friend. Is it a waste of the 21st century people's times to talk about 1900 years old fables?
Not a waste of time, because that kind of, let me push back, because that kind of dogmatism is what led the Pittsburgh shooter to enter a synagogue in 2019 and gun down 11 people. And when police officers looked at his social media page, it said John 8:44, Jews are the devil. All right. So whether you think it's a fable or not, and actually part of me believes that some of that is a fable. Like I'm saying that some of those ideas are embellished. And because that's the case, it led to how many like countless Jewish deaths. So I'll match this dogmatism with my dogmatism.
Very interesting. Hey, we've got another question by Elder Igloo that I finally found. Thank you for your question, Elder Igloo. What are your thoughts on Joseph apparently saying that Judas was a traitor and instead of hanging himself was hung by Peter?
We say, like, are they referring to Joseph Smith?
Yes, Joseph Smith in the history of the church. And Radio Free Mormon actually pointed this out to me once. Judas was a traitor and instead of hanging himself was hung by Peter. That's kind of an interesting take.
Yeah, and I wonder where, my first thought is I wonder where Joseph is getting that. So always where I go back and, what traditions does he have? We know he's reading apocryphal works, those that are available to him. He's quoting them. So yeah, that kind of question is fascinating to see how early Mormon tradition, early Mormon like interpretation, like what they're reading that informs this.
Yeah, that would be fun to find that. Actually, Dan Vogel has 5 volumes of stuff like that. Well, that might be worth looking into. Radio Free Mormon asks, any concern about going on BYP's show from anyone?
Yeah, this is, there's probably, I don't know if there's going to be a concern by some, but it's possible. But I asked some of my colleagues, do you think I will get in trouble, going on this? I'm assuming that's what Radio Free Mormon is talking about. Everybody I talked to is like, yeah, nobody's gotten in trouble for going on a certain venue. I don't think. It's usually when somebody gets in trouble, it's certain things that they've said, LGBT or something else. And yeah, I guess it remains to be seen. But as far as I'm concerned, if anybody wants to talk to me about my research or about these topics, I'm down with doing it. So
yeah, my kind of scholar. I'm just saying, if someone watches this show and they're concerned about you showing up, I'm sitting here right now because of the quality of your research, singing the praises of BYU, and I have been known to criticize them. I'm not going to hide that, because where criticism is legit, I give it. But I also believe in giving credit where credit's due, and I have said that, and I've demonstrated that on my show too. And this has been delightful. This type of material helps us want to look into the scriptures more. That can't be negative. So from my point of view, you get full credit if someone wants to, yell at you and say, oh, well, you really blew it. I'm here to tell you, you've impressed me, and I'm not that easy to impress. And you have benefited the scriptural information to where I'm sure there's several in my audience who are going to go back into the Bible and recheck some of this stuff out, including me. So as far as I'm concerned, you're a credit to the institution. So that's my point of view. But
I mean, if anybody complains about the venue, then I guess they're not going to let us go to the John Whitmer Historical Association because there are people there. In fact, I've been at the Society for the Social Scientific Study of Religion, where I went to the Mormon study section and they're just blasting the church. Okay, so can I not go there anymore and participate? Like, I don't understand the logic that we can't engage people in different audiences just because of a different belief in truth claims.
Well, we're in a new age too, to where it appears to me like the necessity of engaging in different audiences really does need to occur with much more frequency, and this is a great venue to do so. So almost see you. You're way too nice. Hobgoblin. Yeah. Well, BYU profs are undergoing annual evaluations right now, so it is rather courageous to come on the show for one of them. That's a good compliment. My annual evaluation is Dr. Hatch is so well informed and so good at explaining the scriptures that I'm going to have him on many times if he will and can. And even if he won't, we're going to sneak him on. So after all, I am the backyard professor. I work magic. Okay, let's see. Oh, so, well, I did say I was going to answer questions. We opened up another subject, Trevan, but this is a good question from Patrick Kelly. I'll read your question, Patrick. Thank you for asking it. Excellent. So you're saying the Pharisees wanted to kill him because he was once one of them?
And I'm saying the Pharisees didn't want to kill him.
There's the catch, and leave it at that. I'm because this is what makes his chapter so fascinating, Patrick. I promise when I have Dr. Hatch back and we do the Pharisees one, you are in for an eye-opening experience. Or better yet, go get his book and read it and then come back and you'll have more questions still. But yeah. Thank you for your question. Don't mean to put you off, but I'm trying to generate some interest because this is without question one of those parts of his book where I had to shut the book, stand up, walk around and go, did Dr. Hatch just say what I think he said? And reread it and say, yep, he sure did. I love research like this. BYU, you need people like Dr. Hatch who can put out the quality information. This stuff right here, the New Testament, History, Culture, and Society, editor Blumel. What a fantastic job this man did of bringing disparate, various, excellent scholars together to produce something beyond the same stuff. Who were Jesus's mom and brothers? Although even that could get pretty hefty, can't it? But anyway, so thank you for, it's time to open up a little bit. And I think Dr. Hatch is on the front end of this, which is absolutely, from my point of view, spectacular. Let's see. Any other questions? Looks like we are running out of questions. You guys are having a lot of fun, which is awesome. Okay, here we go. Oh, Lael. Mormons, the story. Okay, let's. Okay, Mormon Discussion Inc. at Mormons. Lael, thank you for re-asking. Appreciate it. I didn't mean to make it difficult for you, I promise. The story of the rich boy coming to Jesus, what does the Greek actually say? I've seen the 1611 version says only one man good, that is God. Oh, okay, that has nothing to do with Judas, but do you want to talk about that?
I'd have to look it up and
yeah, we'd have to. I'll tell you what, Leo, we will look that up and see, because now you've got my curiosity. I always like going to the Greek too. So Dr. Hatch and I will make that one of our assignments to look that up. Oh, hey, Dan Vogel is saying something here very interesting. Our very good, sharp friend, it was Rigdon who said Peter hanged Judas and suggested that the same should happen to Mormon dissenters.
Oh, wow.
So it was Rigdon. Thank you, Dan Vogel, for clarifying. I always love having you in the audience. He is so sharp with the history of the church and all. Okay. It looks like let's we're at an hour 38. Let's go ahead and before we close out, Dr. Hatch, thank you everybody for all your okay. T.O., I just saw your comment and I will ask it real quick. And you don't have to answer this quick. If you want to elaborate, we're good. T.O. asks, ask Dr. Hatch to comment on Judas's betrayal as a temple scene, tying it in from his earlier comment. Have you ever heard that kind of an approach or a discussion much at all from anyone?
Never seen it, except for in Latter-day Saint circles, Latter-day Saint, the tradition circles. And I don't see anything there, but I always, to a Latter-day Saint, everything is a temple text, right?
Oh my gosh, thank you. Thank you for finally saying that. That's been driving me nuts for 5 years. No offense against any Mormons, honest to goodness, but not everything written can possibly be a temple text.
But I will say it's possible to have some of these connections to the temple, but in fact, the word tecton, or Jesus as a carpenter, I could probably do that another time. I do think that there's a lot of connections to the temple there, but in order to get there, you have to go through and see what words he's using, what episodes in Hebrew scriptures he's using to get there. But there's a lot of Latter-day Saints that will just go look into it and be like, oh, this is similar and reminiscent of what Mormons do. So from a Latter-day Saint angle, I don't see anything. In order to see something, I'd have to go through Matthew. I have to go through a first century Jewish author or another one of the authors. And I don't see that.
Okay, that's legit. Okay, thank you for your question, T.O. That was awesome. Okay, so we're gonna close out. Before we do, Dr. Hatch, do you have any closing ideas or things you'd like to say that you think we skipped over?
No, I'm good. I thank everybody for letting me come on and talk about this stuff. If anybody's interested, this will be, I just happened to see this. I'm not sure how much of your audience listening now will appreciate it, but this is a book so I've got this book that came out, like the Jesus book is not written to a Latter-day Saint audience, but this book, Greater Love Hath No Man, by the title, it seems kind of fluffy, but what we decided to do, Eric Huntsman and I, he's the Jerusalem Center director right now, we wanted to put a guide. The subtitle is A Guide to Celebrating Holy Week, a Latter-day Saint Guide to Celebrating Holy Week.
Oh, nice.
So some of you, even if you're not in the church, or some of you who are in the church, you might appreciate, we just go every day through Holy Week. And what we're trying to do is get people in the Latter-day Saint tradition to appreciate what Christians have done at that time of year. And so maybe some of it will help you. When we go through and we give the scriptural text, the events that happened to Jesus that relevant to that particular day throughout the last week. And then we give, so we give you that. We give you some scholarship, a lot of stuff you're getting here. Like, we don't hold back. We give a lot of good scholarship. Then we have a section on how Christians have historically observed that particular day all throughout Europe and everything. So that's interesting. And then the last section is suggestions for Latter-day Saints on how they might observe these traditions. And so again, even if you're not a Latter-day Saint or you're post Latter-day Saint or whatever, I still think you might benefit from it. So that's not out yet, but that's the most recent project.
So you're still working and chugging and churning good materials out for us to read. And now we're going to churn and chug and produce excellent video reviews and ideas and comments with the audience and take questions and learn visually as well as intellectually, as well as through the reading and the literature. So good things are coming our way, which is always exciting as far as I'm concerned. Okay, you guys, well, we're going to call it good. Thank you so much for showing, and thank you for your questions and your comments. And we will have Dr. Hatch back again to discuss much more of his book and his articles. In the meantime, remember, A Stranger from Jerusalem. Go get that book. It's on Amazon.com. It's not expensive. It is superb. I really loved how he clarified so much of the difficulty in between the gaps with the Gospels and in between the gaps of the Gospels and Paul. It was just doggone well fun and worth reading. So thank you, Dr. Hatch. It has been an absolute pleasure. We're going to slide out of here and talk behind the scenes. In the meantime, remember, have fun, do well, be good, work hard, smile lots. It makes people wonder what you're doing. And we will see you guys next week on the same time, same place.
Thanks, everyone.